Alistair, would it be right to call you an adventurer? Is that how you would describe yourself?
It sort of depends what company I'm keeping, but yeah, that's probably a good start.
Okay, good. And we'll come on to more sustainable issues and all of those things later. But tell me a bit about your story from the start, because I mean, you were a mega adventurer, weren't you? You went from a point in your life of not exactly knowing what you were going to do with yourself to getting on a bike. First sustainable move, I have to say.
Yeah, so
Tell us
my
about your early days.
so my early days, I grew up as a kid in the Yorkshire Dales, a sort of nice, normal, happy, running around, climbing up trees sort of childhood, but nothing particularly adventurous. And then I spent most of my time at university not doing any work, but mostly reading books about adventures and expeditions and exploration. And that's got me intrigued to have a go myself. So when I graduated, I got on my bike and I set off to try to cycle around the world. And I was away for over 4 years, cycling 46,000 miles through 60 countries, crossing oceans by boats rather than aeroplane. And the whole 4 year trip cost just under £7,000, i.e., my entire life savings. But what's interesting about that, with
I'm
the
glad you said
relevance,
that. I thought you were going to say my entire student loan.
the relevance, I guess, of this today, it's interesting to think that in all those 4 years going around the world, bicycle, boats, no aeroplanes, not once did I think, oh, this is a good environmentally friendly adventure. And not once did anyone ever say that to me. And that was 20 years ago. So it's interesting how the conversation has evolved since then. And then since then, my adventures have gone ever smaller since then. So for a few years, I still did big stuff. So I walked across southern India. I rode across the Atlantic Ocean, walked across the empty quarter desert, played my violin very badly through Spain to busk for some money, despite not being able to play the violin. So some sort of big adventures. Then I started going smaller. Should
Well,
I keep
because then you
talking
had
or
an
should I pause?
epiphany, didn't? Well, you had an epiphany moment. Yeah, pause. Because in the middle of that, between macro and micro adventures, there was a bit of an epiphany. Tell me about that.
Well, I started to think that I love these big adventures, and I'd encourage anyone who's lucky enough to have the opportunity to go do some massive adventure. But I realised that there's quite a difference between people who enjoy hearing about big adventures or reading books about them, which is loads of people, and then there are far fewer people actually doing them. And that, of course, is because of real life, money, family, time, jobs, all that sort of stuff. So I started trying to work out if there was a way to get some of the fun and the benefits and the great stuff you get from traveling in the outdoors into a smaller, more packageable way that people could fit in around their busy everyday lives. And that led me on to an era of what I call micro adventures. So just trying to find short, simple, local alternatives to adventures, essentially sleeping on hills, riding your bike at the weekend, jumping in rivers, all that sort of stuff. And I've been doing that for years now, trying to encourage lots of other people to get out and have micro adventures.
And it was really being a dad that brought you to that point.
Yeah, so there was this sort of realization that I'd like to try and help other people to have the adventures that I was doing, and then along comes real life for myself as well. So having kids, and then suddenly the possibilities for just gallivanting off for years on end go. But in my heart, I was still this adventurous, free spirit. So I had to try and find a way to combine being an adventurous, free spirit guy, but also a
Yeah.
good present stay-at-home dad.
And I love
And I
that. I mean, I've heard you describe that story where the tears just suddenly came out of you. Like this rift was obviously going on, this little battle internally for a while, almost without you realizing it, right?
Yeah, I think because I guess when I was in my early 20s, dreaming of big adventures, I sort of set these rules for my life. For my life to be successful and meaningful to me, I need to be doing tough, difficult adventures to prove whatever to myself and to feel that I'm fulfilled as a person. And I kind of kept those rules for life going for a long time without really evolving them. And then when I was a dad, obviously life is quite different, but I was still trying to live in this way that I'd been doing for years. And there was a real internal conflict between the two. And eventually I realized that something had to give. I could either be an amazing go off around the world adventurer, or I could be an amazing stay at home dad. But I couldn't really be both. And the choice, when you see it like that, is pretty clear, pretty obvious. So hence the micro adventures. I've still got this itch to be out in the wild. Let's go sleep on the hill once all the kids are asleep for the night, and then get home in time for breakfast, that sort of thing.
And I love the way that you describe it as, particularly when you tell that story, because I was watching your stuff online when you tell that story about you had this moment and then all the tears came out and you decided, actually, this is my real life. Real life is family. Real life is home. And I love the way that you describe that. And I think we all have these different chapters in our lives. You know, we go from that young free single, what's it going to take to build me up? And, you know, what do I want to do? And it's all about me. And then suddenly we grow up and it's not all about us anymore. It's a very different world, isn't it? And so what I'm getting at really is this new sense of the reframe that you did of, okay, well then what now is an adventure? Now I'm thinking about other people, thinking about the people I love. What now is an adventure? And it's not what we think it is necessarily.
Yeah. Or it can be lots of different things as well as what you naturally think it is. So I definitely began my adventuring with quite an elitist mindset of, I want to go out and show that I can be tougher than you and I can do something that you can't do, and that then will make me feel better about my own inadequacy. So there's a lot of that sort of macho proving myself to myself stuff. But a really cathartic and interesting adventure experience I had was when it's my final big adventure, really. I decided to follow the route of Laurie Lee, a travel writer in the 1930s, walked through Spain playing his violin. And it's a book that I've always loved. And I've always dreamed of doing that trip myself, but I can't play the violin literally can't play the violin. And the idea of trying to busk in public just fills me with terror and horror. But I realized that these big adventures that I'd been doing for quite a few years were in some way my own version of a comfort zone, my own routine and rut. I knew I was good at that sort of stuff. And perhaps if I wanted to be adventurous, what I really needed to do was get out of my comfort zone again and do something that was new and uncertain and risky and with a high chance of failure, but a sort of tantalizing, thrilling possibility of success. And what that meant at this time of my life was not to cycle thousands of miles. It meant to start violin lessons. And then after just 6 months of violin lessons, when I was still incredibly useless at the violin, I spent a month following Laurie Lee's route through northern Spain with no money, no credit card, and just having to stand in thinking, you know, if I want to buy some bread today, I've got to stand in this village square and go until I earn a coin. It was an exercise in vulnerability and facing your fears, admitting your weaknesses and just going for it. And that broadened my definition of what is adventure considerably, because the adventure on that trip wasn't the walking 500 miles and sleeping in the mountains and cooking on fires, all that sort of stuff I've been doing for 20 years. The adventure was just daring myself to just expose myself internally, I suppose, and just dare myself to try and play the violin to earn a banana.
Well, and you really get to see, I mean, frankly, I have had children of mine learning the violin. It's not pleasant. And it can push you right over the edge. To the brink.
I was amazed how horrible it sounds.
But I can imagine that you got to get, you know, you got to get a good insight into people. And are they paying you to stop at that point?
I think they might be. I mean, to give you an idea, when I came home, having played for hours every day for the month I was out there, I still had to keep practicing in order to sit my grade 1 music exam, me in a room full of 6-year-olds. So I really was absolutely useless. But so it was fascinating, just the generosity and the kindness of strangers who were support me. Perhaps they were paying me to shut up, but they were just being kind. They saw that I was having a go, I suppose, and were willing to just throw a little gesture of kindness that way and then carry on with their day. So it's a lovely, positive human experience as well.
And your adventuring wasn't stopping there. And in fact, you still had the great honour of becoming National Geographic Adventurer of the Year ahead of you, even though everything's scaling down, scaling down, scaling down. I'm guessing they didn't give you that for the violin.
Well, so they actually the National Geographic Award, which just was thrilling to me. That came actually for the micro adventures, for doing all these really short, small things, encouraging people to get out and sleep on the hills and go do stuff with their kids at the weekends. And it was interesting because I spent years trying to be like this big tough guy. The new Ranulph finds nobody cared at all. The world's got enough people like that.
We've got loads of them.
And then, yeah, exactly. There's thousands of people like that. And I was dreaming of that. No one cared. And then suddenly I start going on sleep on a little hill in the suburbs outside London. And I get this incredible accolade. So I felt a bit of a fraud, but it was also really nice to realize that you can do something useful here by just trying to encourage other people to get outdoors as well and get out into nature and connect with nature and spend time with their family and their friends and get some exercise and get off their phones and all this good stuff that can connect with just adventuring.
And were those the factors that National Geographic considered when they were, was that what they loved?
Yeah, they really have got better things to look at than someone sleeping on a hill in Surrey for the night. But what it was it was
National
the community
Geographic
aspect.
Explorers are the cream of the crop, aren't they? And so it's a huge accolade.
Yeah, it was great. It was fantastic. So really, it was for the community building side of it. I spent a lot of time trying to build up Facebook groups around the country where different groups of people would meet up and go and do adventures together, because it can be a bit nerve-wracking to go do something like this if you haven't done it before. So some Facebook groups and community groups, and the microadventure hashtag was really useful because I could see then what other people have been doing and then amplify it through my channels, which is really helpful for showing other people that it wasn't just this middle-class white guy doing this sort of stuff. It was women and young people and old people and families and blah, 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 blah. And once you see other people like you doing something, it becomes much easier for you to do that thing too.
Agreed. And I think there's an adventurous soul in all of us, actually. I think it is part of being human. Very often, and I want to call you back to this word connected, it's very often that part of us we've disconnected from. I've been exploring some of that in my writing work. But we've also disconnected so much from the natural world. And obviously that part of the cycling expedition, the 4-year cycling expedition, that part wasn't really in your brain, as you honestly said, when you set off, and nor was it in our collective consciousness, really. But a very different scenario now. I mean, looking back to those 4 years and the years afterwards where you were exploring and adventuring, what do you think you gained from, because undoubtedly you must have had a greater connection with nature?
So when I think back to 4 years in my 20s cycling around the world, I was outside for 24 hours a day for weeks on end. And that's just and living an incredibly simple life. Just ride your bike, put up your tent, eat some pasta, watch the sunset, watch the stars, go to bed, repeat. If it rains, you get wet. If it's windy, you get blown around. So I think that real immersion in a simple life out in nature, deep down, just got me really passionate about wild places. But I didn't really care about nature particularly much. I loved being in these wild places, but I didn't sort of make any connections. And that was a fantastic, accidentally eco adventure. But after that, then I happily just started jumping on jet planes and flying off to adventures. I flew off to the desert. I flew off to near Greenland. I was just loving it, going to these wild places like a lot of adventurous people do. And I was having a whale of a time going off to all these parts of the world, and gradually making it my job. And it was really only as the years went by, and alarmingly recently, really, I mean, within the last decade, that I started to think, hang on, maybe flying around to all these wild places and claiming to love wild places, there's some sort of jarring disconnect here. Might it be actually the case that if I love these wild places so much, I should try and protect them by not flying off to them? And that started to get my small little brain whirring about the impact of adventure and travel. I think a lot of us who we love travel, we love nature, we love these wild places, we're the ones who are wrecking them as well. And that's a discomforting thought.
I've been writing a book called Wild Woman, and I had a really interesting conversation with a woman who was a conservationist in Africa along the same lines. And she said, there's a point where I realized I don't need to be there. In fact, it's better if I'm not, right in the forest. And I don't need to see all of these animals to know. She has seen them, of course, because she's older. She's had an amazing career, but she said, I don't need to keep seeing them to remind me that they're there, to remind me that I need to do the work to help. And in fact, helping is not being there. And of course, it's a real disjunct, isn't it? Because like you said, the human that evolved to be in those wild places responds and loves. And even if it's cold and windy, you're still living, right? You're still out there living, doing what humans have evolved to do for millions of years. But at the same time, we need to start getting above and beyond that and really, being thoughtful about our impact. So what do you do? There you are with all of these amazing instincts, to get out and feel it all. And then, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. How do you still satisfy that part of you? Because I'm still not sold on micro adventure, go and camp on a hill. Sell it.
You're not? Okay.
Sell it to me.
Okay, I can sell this to you. So one thing that I'm going to make some suppositions about you, but I imagine you like being in wild places. You like nature. You maybe like doing some physical exercise, get the blood going a little bit. You maybe get a bit frustrated at life, a bit annoyed at boring stuff at home and
you got
emails and maybe you just want to go and howl at the moon every so often. So maybe rather than getting too bogged down by the 9 to 5 grind, 9 to 5 grinding us all down, maybe what you need to do is one day at 5 p.m. think about what opportunities for adventure can still fit around your busy working day. And then you pack a little rucksack and a little sandwich or whatever you fancy for your tea, maybe a small little mini bottle of wine if you wish. And then you head out to somewhere near you, because I can guarantee that within half an hour of where you live will be some beautiful little woodland or a nice hill or somewhere with a great view or the seaside or something. And then that's it. You're out in nature. You turn off your phone for the night. You sleep out under the stars. This story doesn't work very well if it rains. It's a lovely, clear night. The stars are fantastic and bright. You wake up with the tweeting of the birds at sunrise. You make yourself a little coffee on your camping stove, maybe. Run down the hill. Jump in a river if you dare. Jumping in a river is always good for the soul. Back on the train, bus, bike, whatever. Back to your desk. Ready for your next 9 a.m. podcast interview the next morning. Perhaps looking a little bit sort of sleep disheveled and the odd twigs in your hair, but at least then when people say to you, oh, Philip, have you done anything interesting recently? For once, you don't have to lie and pretend to have done all sorts of exciting stuff. And you can say, yes, I had a micro adventure. And I can guarantee that in a year from now, you will remember that as being a memorable experience. So it's about trying to squeeze in all those things, wildness and slowness and simplicity in nature in amongst the framework of busy life. Does that sound interesting, or does it still sound
You've
terrible?
sold it.
Okay.
You sold it.
Don't
Especially
do it when it's raining.
The dipping in the water thing. You always do feel like you've interacted with the world, with a bit of wild swimming, as we like to call it in this country. Normal swimming is what most countries call it.
Yes, exactly. But I think, though, that's a really interesting point. The fact that in recent years, wild swimming has become quite popular, swimming in rivers, and it's become quite trendy, and you can read endless Guardian articles about it. But the fact that we call it wild swimming, and somehow that has to be differentiated to going to a blue chlorine rectangle full of that we're so disconnected from nature that it seems like an unusual and striking thing to do. So, yeah, I'm a big, big fan of wild swimming. Or swimming,
and it gives you that dopamine. I mean, from a purely evolutionary point of view, we're dopamine seekers on the whole. We need a little bit of that, and we traditionally did get it out in the wilderness. So there's a really interesting element to all of our evolution, I think.
There's an old travel writer called Dervla Murphy. She was one of my early inspirations. She was a tough old Irish woman, and she cycled from Ireland to India in the 1960s when it was a pretty rare thing to do, carrying a pistol, and she had all sorts of crazy adventures. And she's written 20 travel books of crazy adventures. But one line's always struck me, which is that she didn't always want to go for a swim, but she never ever regretted having a swim afterwards. So I bear that in mind a lot. And there's a lot of things are solved by a quick plunge in a chilly bit of water, done safely, of
Yeah. Oh,
course.
I like the sound of her. You'll have to send us some information on her books.
Okay, yeah, Dervla Murphy.
Yeah.
She's a lovely old lady.
Yeah, we'd like that, and then we can post them, and everyone can have a good read. I'm guessing, are they still in print?
Oh, the books are very much still in print.
Are they?
I slightly think she died about a year ago, but her books are very much still in print. And I'm sad I've never met her because I think she has died because I remember being sad not to have met her. She was a tough Irish lady who liked drinking Guinness, very no nonsense adventuring, but yeah, very much still in print.
And the thing about adventuring is it is akin to our link to nature, to our need now to think more sustainably. So your micro adventures, of course, are not just about being close to your family and those practical measures and fitting it into our 9 to 5 day, but they are also so much about how do we make ourselves sustainable.
Yeah, very much so. And then again, in terms of the timeline of all these things, so when I started micro adventuring in about 2010, that was not on my radar one bit. But within the time since I've been doing micro adventures, it's become increasingly apparent to me how, yeah, this is a really good way to live and to connect. And actually, I've moved over the last year a step even smaller than micro adventures to a year just exploring the single local map that I live on, going out once a week to explore really locally, just trying to encourage more people to search for nearby nature and tiny pockets of wildness and to try and build that into a regular routine rather than just thinking, when I get to my holidays in a couple of months, we'll go for a nice walk in the countryside on our holiday. That would be great. I think trying to find nearby nature is a way to find it literally in your lunch break today, to go find somewhere close to where you live you've never seen before, never paid attention, never slowed down to be curious about the random little plants growing in the corner.
In the
And
same way that is, if we found ourselves in Sydney, we'd get out our guidebook and our map and we'd say, and we've got 2 weeks, what are we going to go and see? And I love that. You've really formalized it, haven't you? You've taken a section of the map around about where you are and encouraging other people to do the same thing. How does it work? How big an area are we looking at?
yeah. So first of all, I'm so glad you said that about going somewhere and getting the guidebook, because I think a key thing to being a local explorer is to remember how curious and fascinated you are by every aspect of daily life when you go off to some distant exotic place. Everything in life is just fascinating and crazy and stimulating, isn't it? But when you come home, you're like, oh, home, boring, and then you sort of put your blinkers on and you switch off. So
Well,
the
and
key
also
to
that when
all
you're a grown up, there's loads of jobs to do. There's
yes, there are
tons of
loads of
jobs to
jobs.
do. So
Yes, yeah.
you don't really think in the same way as you do on holiday when you're just staying in a hotel and there's going to be dinner cooked. Somebody's going to do the washing up. That's not me. And somebody else has already washed the bed. That's not me. All of those jobs. No, I'm not mowing the lawn at the hotel,
Yes,
or
that
even the
certainly all
campsite.
helps. Yes. Yeah,
So
yeah,
we've got to get ourselves into a different mindset as
yeah.
well, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. So then the structure of what I did was I bought the Ordnance Survey map for where I live. You know, the sort of maps you'd get if you're going to go for a walking trip in the Lake District. The whole country, whole of Britain is covered by these maps, and wherever you live, you can get the map with your house on it. And they measure about 20, the area is about 20 kilometers by 20 kilometers. So pretty small local area. You probably generally think you know the area quite well. It's divided, the maps are just divided up into 400-kilometer grid squares, so little grid squares of 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, kind of small little area. And my plan was to spend a whole year only exploring this map, to not go off adventuring far and wide, to try and contain my wanderlust and get to know the town a few miles down the road that I've never been to, as well as I might know Uzbekistan or Alaska. So every week I went out to explore one grid square on this map, chosen at random, and to try and see everything in it, 1 kilometre by 1 kilometre, to see every footpath, every street, every behind the factory, every bit of woodland, just to see everything and to slow down and try and notice the nature was there and find interesting stuff. And I worried at first that this might be quite a boring idea. I live just in suburbs outside the city, not very interesting. But I soon realized that actually there's so much in 1 kilometre if you slow down and start to pay attention to it.
And what were the nicest discoveries, do you think?
Well, something that helped me enormously was I have an app on my phone called Seek. It's made by iNaturalist, and you point your phone at a plant or an insect or whatever you find, and it tells you the name of it. And so this, for the first time in my life, really started to educate me about nature. So rather than just thinking, oh, there's some random plants, I'd now started to learn their name. And once you know the name of something, you start to connect to it a bit more and care about it. And then you see it again and again. And suddenly you start to get some sort of ownership of where you live. So I really enjoyed.
And you think, oh, it grows in these kinds of places. Like a budway you'll see in old factory sites and things like that. Oh, that's where this one, I see it quite often in this kind of situation.
But what you said there leads me on to you asked what was some sort of surprise that I liked. What I discovered I loved was the sort of rundown factory wasteland stuff, the sort of thing that you just zoom by in the car and think, oh, that's a bit ugly. These became my favorite places to wander around the back of places, the sort of place I never normally go, and to see the buddleia, the wild plants, the trees pushing through broken tarmac. And it gave me a lot of hope, really, for rewilding. Like, wow, if you just do nothing for nature, step back, it comes back on its own. And this made me really hopeful that if we don't mess things up too much, then nature is incredibly resilient. So I came to love those dirty, scuzzy, broken down sort of landscapes and finding the beauty and the wildness within those places.
Do you take a camera with you?
So another aspect of me trying to make myself slow down. So generally, I'm just quite hyperactive and I tend to charge around everywhere. But the more I could slow and pay attention, the more interested everything was. So a way I helped myself do that was by taking a camera with me, not my phone, because I wanted to be on my phone as little as possible, an actual camera. And then I would try to take lots of beautiful pictures every week. And I tried to find the beauty in everything, whether that was a burned out car or some graffiti or some smashed bottles or some beautiful snowdrops or the buddleia flowers. So yeah, photography was a big part of making me pay attention
and appreciate. I mean, I think that's one thing that we're not hardwired always to do. We have to remind ourselves, whether it's because we're thanking a god or we're thanking whatever, the universe, but appreciation is something we don't automatically always do, isn't it?
Yeah, and for me personally, that was a really important aspect of it, that exact word, because I don't really like where I live. I wish I lived in the mountains or by the coast with surfing or I spend a lot of my life wishing that I was elsewhere. It's one of my traits. And so this was an exercise in just appreciating this is where I am. And actually, there's some cool stuff here. There's lots of it. There's history, there's nature, there's all sorts of things. So I can appreciate what is here rather than lamenting or moaning about all that is not here. So that was a big part of it, was slowing down and appreciating it and noticing the seasons moving on as well. That was a really nice part of it.
It's another shift of mindset. It's another reframe. We've seen you reframe and reframe and reframe. It's another reframe. And I'm interested to know what's the reaction to this. I mean, obviously National Geographic had a very positive reaction to it, but what's, from just an interaction with people point of view, who's interested, who does it, who.
Yeah, okay. So, well, first, National Geographic don't know about me just now spending my days nosing around the back of railway yards. So this is a new. I'm yet to achieve receive an award for this. So in terms of, I've just been doing this just this last year. But what I find is that people. I thought when I had this idea that it was the sort of weird thing that I would enjoy. But actually I found that talking to lots of people thought, oh yeah, interesting idea. Oh, I'd like to try that. Or, oh, I've done a little bit something similar to that. I've walked around my town a little bit. And so it does seem to be a bit more universally appealing, perhaps even than sleeping on hills and jumping in cold rivers is. I think that, because I think a really good thing about this map is that you can see your map in whatever way appeals to you. When I started exploring my map, what I thought I was going to do was Micro Adventures version 2. Here's some fun ways to go hiking, biking, camping, that sort of stuff. Fun adventure owl stuff. But actually, what interested me when I started to pay attention was the nature. For the first time in my life, was noticing, wow, this is how we use all our land. Wow, we've got no nature left in this country. Wow, our rivers are really polluted. Stuff that I sort of knew about, of course, but hadn't viscerally come to care about or take ownership of. But if somebody else went to explore their local map, they might think, wow, there's loads of historical churches around here, or look at the history of the railway yards or whatever. So, or the folk music on this place. So it's about slowing down and finding what appeals to you. And I think that's something that anyone can find on their map if they slow down and concentrate, is something that will spark your own curiosity.
Have you had any nice feedback? Have you had people bring you some nice stories?
Well, I've written a book about this that's just coming out now, and I just had my very first email feedback yesterday from a reader, which is always an exciting thing. And they said, I've just started reading your book. It might be a long time before I finish it. I almost threw it in the bin. And this was a reader getting quite angry because I talk about the way that we use our land for intensive farming and some of the problems that intensive farming lead to. And he got a bit cross at me. So my first feedback was terrible. So I don't know if this is a good advert for me to persuade your readers to buy my book, but I kind of actually like that, because one thing I wanted to do is provoke people to realize some of the issues that our natural landscape faces, and to once you know what's happening, then you of course can make your own choices what you do about that. But I think it's upon all of us to be informed, and then we can make our choices.
And I mean, I'm guessing also you could make a bigger project. You know, you get feedback, good and bad, obviously, when you write anything and put it out there. But you know, with a lot of information potentially coming your way, you could build quite a big profile of the secrets.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I just got so fascinated with my map. I would every week I'd go out and I'd take photos, and then I'd write notes. I didn't want to Google what I was finding when I was out there, because that would distract me. So when I'd come home, I'd then Google all the stuff that I'd found. And I just went down so many rabbit holes. You know, I learned about the maximum possible size raindrops can be and why they have this limit in size. I learned about the different kinds of manhole covers and why they're different shapes. Just once you start to know, everything has its sort of interesting things, and then you can go diving down internet rabbit holes. When I wrote my book at first, it was 250,000 words. I had to delete 150,000 words of it because it was just far too much random depth of information. But it was interesting to do the research. I became a curious learner in a way that school and university never managed to make me.
Just from going out there and being inspired. And has this, I mean, we go back to real life, as you called it, you know, and the reason you gave out the macro adventuring. Have you managed to involve your son with this stuff yet?
Yeah, so I'm generally the stay-at-home dad, as you'll know, Philippa, from kindly delaying this podcast because I had to do one of those emergency runs to school to pick up a sick child. So thank you.
We get it.
So yeah, so another reason for doing this local adventure was how can I still get my nature and adventure fix whilst also doing all the real life stuff. So generally I would do all of this during school hours, which was my time of, right, drop the kid off, run, go see some wild places, come back, write them up. So, but what we do, we get out into nature as much as we can, and we do fun adventure stuff. But I'm always at pains to point out that just because I'm an adventurer, I'm not some sort of uber super perfect naturalist parent. And actually my kids would mostly rather spend all their days on Fortnite and TikTok. So I'm deep in that battle. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we would be showing ours, you know, wild otters out of the kitchen window, and they'd be going, can we go and play on the Wii now? You know, I mean,
Yes,
it's just,
exactly.
and you're thinking, how is this my child? How can I? But there's got to be something, right? You're planting seeds, which I'm sure you do see. You do see the fruition of that. And I think that it's really important for all children to have access to some natural point near to them that they can experience. Um, and
Yeah,
and and certainly when it comes to caring about the natural world and how we move forward, looking after it.
yeah. It's. I mean, you read these terrifying statistics about children spending less time outdoors than prisoners, and there's another podcast. I don't want to advertise rival podcast on your show, but the
You
one called
can.
Thousand Hours Outside. It's an American lovely lady in America who realized that kids spend 1,000 hours a year on the screen. So she's trying to get people to spend 1,000 hours outside. And the fact that, I think when you first hear that, it's like, wow, 1,000 hours outside, that's a lot. Oh, that's going to be difficult. And yet we all manage to spend 1,000 hours a year on Instagram or something. So this is a disconnect. And one of the things I kept finding time and again as I was going around my map was realizing how many of the problems we face as a society come from not going to run around the woods enough. And there's the connection between, say, your physical health and mental health from spending time outdoors. Also, just knowing about the wild places and therefore caring about them a little bit, realizing that the way our land is used is terrible for nature. And a lot of that is connected to what we eat, and what we eat is connected to our physical and mental health, and round it all goes. So, yeah, I became quite passionate about just trying to get more people outside more often, wherever you happen to live, in whatever tiny periods of time you have in amongst all of your busy commitments of life.
And I love that I mean, I love your story because you've started as this adventurer, but in your travels, you've gotten to know yourself as a human and what, those common qualities of what do we need and what do we love and what brings us out of our shell. And then brought it home, but also what is that phrase that we were always told? You can travel for as long as you like. And there's countless fairy stories based on that idea of going out there, but actually coming back to yourself and coming back to your home. And that being the ultimate adventure, really, because where you go, you take yourself with you, right?
Yes, yeah. So I think part of my big adventures was running away from life, and then come home and realize, oh, actually, I was with me all the time, so I didn't manage to escape from that. And then my book about playing the violin through Spain, I ended that by talking about I'd gone all the way around the world to look for treasure and realized actually it was right home with my family. And then this book I've done now, I started with that T.S. Eliot quote of the end of all our exploring is to return to where we started and know the place for the first time. And that really resonates with me, that I spent years thinking that if I want to have adventure, I just need to go as far away from here as possible because home is so boring, which is a fairly common trait for youngish people, I guess. And yet coming home to realize, wow, there's so much right outside my front door that I'd literally never even noticed in my life before. So maybe a single map is enough exploration for an entire lifetime. Who knows?
Wonderful, and inspiring us very much to value what's right outside there. It's not just all about the big species far away, but it's very often about what we're doing and what we've got right outside our front door. So thank you so much, Alastair. Really appreciate your time, and we'll let you get back to your child.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Who came home early, but is doing all right, really, aren't they?
I suspect by the time we're off this podcast, he might have made a miraculous recovery to be in front of his PlayStation, is my prediction.
Nothing like coming home. Yeah, nothing like a bit of time off school to make you feel suddenly miraculously better.
Exactly. And who can
really
begrudge a child a bit of that? Thank you.
I know.